Hey everybody, today what I want to talk about are some nonfiction books that had a big impact on my life. And there's some random stuff here. I tried to pick 5, but I couldn't get it down to that, so I've got some extras here. So the first one that I want to talk about is No One Here Gets Out Alive. So this is a biography of Jim Morrison, who was the lead singer for The Doors. I got this book when I was 12, I think, 11 or 12. And the first time I read it, I was like, oh man, this guy is the coolest dude ever. I want to be, a mystical rock shaman just like him. Then I read it again when I was in my 20s, and I was like, ugh, this guy's kind of a buffoon, and really not exactly the nicest guy on the planet. Then I read it again when I was in my 30s, and I'm like, beyond that, he's just kind of a bad dude. Like, I wouldn't want to hang out with this guy. He's a mess. I read it again in my 40s, and then you start to see, like, this guy was really afflicted by alcoholism, and all of the behaviors that go along with that are exhibited in this book. In the intervening decade, I had the opportunity to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and when I did that, it was interesting because they have a section devoted to the Doors and to Jim Morrison, and as part of that, they have this collection of letters that are from his family to him. For those who don't know, his dad was actually the captain of an aircraft carrier, and later I think was an admiral in the U.S. Navy. And it was part of the Vietnam era, so combat's going on, all these sorts of things. But his dad is writing letters to him. He's writing letters back to his dad. Things like, we've got this new band and it's great, and all this kind of thing. And then when Morrison's legal troubles emerged later, his dad wrote letters to the judge for leniency and all this sort of stuff. That narrative runs extremely in opposition to what's in this book. Because in the book, they make it out like he just rejected his parents and had nothing to do with them and told people they were dead. And maybe he did. But at the same time, clearly he's communicating with them. And so it makes you kind of wonder how sensationalized this book is. It's a good tale. It's interesting. It's one of the better kind of rock and roll biography picks that you might get into. But word of caution, I kind of tend to think a lot of it's exaggerated. The next book that I'd like to talk about is Carl Sagan's Cosmos. Something that many of us that are my age watched his TV show, which is based on this, or maybe the other way around. But this book is an amazing introduction to science, and I've always appreciated people who can translate extremely complex things into normal language. And Carl Sagan is one of those people. So if you're not an astrophysicist, which I don't know any astrophysicists personally, this book really kind of gives you a sense of that, along with some other sciences like biology and even archaeology, and there's historical examples, and there's lots of astronomy, of course, and discussions of that, but also this underlying theme of progress and the civilizing influence of science and the advantages that it can provide. So this is an excellent book. I've read it many times. At any rate, this is another book that I would really recommend that you check out. This next book, quite a bit different, is Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by the Nagoski sisters. And this is pretty funny because I was going through some kind of dramatic, heartbreaking moment a few years back. And one of my friends who was aware of this was driving someplace and literally called me at like 6:30 in the morning and told me about this podcast that she'd heard with them. And then was like, you got to get this book. They've got a book. And so I was kind of in a mess kind of spot, so I got it. And this is a really great book of how to understand kind of the physiological side of things, but also the psychological side. And it's very human and very accessible in discussing what it feels like to live in a modern society and face the stressors and the tendencies towards, overthinking, self-deprecation, negative self-talk, all of that kind of stuff, and ways to ameliorate those things in your life to the degree that you can and that you want to. And so this was really important to me in that moment. I haven't read it again, but this was only a couple years ago, so I might engage with it again later. But if you're kind of someone who tends towards those sorts of things, I would definitely recommend this. The next book is Every Tool's a Hammer, Life is What You Make It by Adam Savage. And for those who are unfamiliar, Adam Savage was one of the co-hosts on Mythbusters for many years, a show that my kids and I watched religiously. And after that, kind of returned to his roots as a maker and a special effects artist and somebody who makes practical props. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. I watch it all the time. Rather than being a book, which I was thinking it might be, of reflections on his time during the Mythbusters show, this is really a practical guide to being creative. He equates making and creativity. To him, those are synonymous. And so this book really is inspiring to me in many ways because there's a lot of attitude about getting rid of gatekeeping, of just try to do things. It may not work the first time, but you'll learn something from it. And those kinds of attitudes and advice are really important to me as someone who used to have a lot of negative self-talk and be like, what's the point of doing that? I'm not going to be good at that. I can't monetize that. All of these kinds of things. Adam Savage is telling you, no, don't listen to those voices. Just try it. It might be fun and you'll learn something from it anyway. And there's just a lot of things in here that I really relate to. Like he's got a chapter on making lists, which I'm a list maker. I don't have my list right here in front of me, but it's right over there. Here's my daily task. Here's larger tasks, and they have subtasks within them. And he presents kind of a modality for doing that. He also talks a lot about first order retrievability, which is something that I have a video about that I learned from him. A way to kind of organize the things that you use in your creative process or in your life to make it more efficient so that you're not scrambling around trying to find things, but rather you have the things that you use commonly present right there in front of you and visible. Just so much in this book is great. And if you are an artist or creative or in any way a maker, I would recommend this book. It's really useful. Plus, there's a chapter about tape. Who knew? The next book is, and really I could have picked any of Stephen Jay Gould's books, but this is The Panda's Thumb. For some, I would guess maybe 15 or 20 years, Stephen Jay Gould put out books that were reflections on the natural sciences in most cases. Sometimes the space sciences, but usually natural sciences and often biology. But he weaved in the history of the development of that particular field. So you might read about how the female assistants of scientists in the 1800s would self-publish in a way that was acceptable to the larger culture. The way that people thought about intelligence and how perhaps in the past people thought, well, the bigger skull you have, the smarter you are. And the development of those ideas to think, no, and the development and the testing of those ideas to determine what is intelligence. Lots of things about biology and evolution and just incredible, sweeping, important topics. I don't say this in a negative way, but these essays are very dense, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of detail that he provides with these stories that he shares. It's something that I often read before I go to bed, and I might get through half of one of these, 10 or so page essays. And then I'm like, whoa, that's enough of that. I'm going to bed. It's not boring. Let me put it that way. It's not boring, but it's dense. And so it takes some effort and concentration to get through them. But he's a really great writer, and he's always putting things in their context. And I really appreciate that as someone who dabbles in history. So if you're into those kinds of things, natural science types of topics, I would recommend really you could get any of his books. Many of them are much like this. He has 2 full-length books that attack particular subjects. Those are good too, although one of them is really more of a science book than like a textbook, than rather a popular press type thing. If you could call this a popular press book. The next book is Mouse, and I've been probably got a copy of it. Used to be in 2 separate pieces, and they put it together into one, and it's a graphic novel, and it is a story of the Holocaust in a sense, but it's also the story of a young man and his relationship with his dad. And his dad was a Holocaust survivor. So was his mother. His mother committed suicide when the author of this book was maybe in his early 20s. It's a reflective look at his own role in the lives of these people and his emotional reactions to them, and his father's story of being Jewish in Poland and being swept up in the war and eventually being sent to Auschwitz. This book has become somewhat controversial and banned in some southern states' school systems, which has led to it becoming incredibly popular once again. It was a Pulitzer Prize winning book when it was published, I think in the 70s. But the illustrations are amazing. There's a lot of emotional feeling in this book, as you wouldn't be surprised to think that. But it's also funny. It's also insightful in the relationships that we have with our parents. I related to that very much. I think everybody should read this book at least once. The next book I'd like to share is The Artist's Way. And this is written by Julia Cameron. I used to be in a group that would go through the exercises in this book. Once a month we'd meet and discuss, what we had done and how the progress we'd made. And this was pre-pandemic, and into the pandemic we converted it to a Zoom meeting. This is a book that the author describes in the beginning how she was struck by writer's block. She was a screenwriter and was unable to do any work, and how the voices in her head that are often rooted in things our parents have told us, experiences we've had with our peers, things teachers have told us, so forth and so on, have blocked us from accessing that creative flow. And it's incredibly valuable in that, when you think about the negative self-talk that many creative types, and I really broaden that definition much in the way that Adam Savage does. There are many things that are creative, and I've heard so many people say, I don't have a creative bone in my body, but they might make quilts, or they might do yard work and arrange their yard and garden and all kinds of things. Anything like that is really a creative exercise. To the larger point, this book kind of has a process by which, through journaling, you identify those negative thoughts and then kind of trace them back and be like, what is that from, and why do I still have it around? Why am I still using this broken old idea? And to kind of discover and uncover and discard those things has been useful for me. It also has some great exercises in terms of working on creative things, whatever that might be, writing or art or anything. To me, probably the most powerful tool that came out of it was that what they call the morning pages. So the morning pages are when you wake up in the morning, you go get your coffee, you sit down, and you write 3 pages, more or less, in freehand, not typing with a pencil or pen. It's sort of a stream of consciousness thing. Whatever is in your head, just let it come out. And oftentimes, the insights that emerge from that, for me, are more like, I've got these things to do today. Great, not a problem. Other times, the insights that emerge from that involve, yesterday somebody said something that was really cool. I should ask them about that today. Or somebody yesterday did something that was really funny. I should make sure that I acknowledge that. Or yesterday I was a little bit curt with somebody or a little bit flippant about something. I need to go clean that up with them. Those kinds of insights really allow me to be more present in my day-to-day life. That is very valuable to me and allows me to really engage with a range of activities that otherwise I wouldn't be able to, because I'd be stuck in my head or stuck on my list or whatever it happens to be. I recommend this book. I've worked through it probably 3 times and found it of great value to my process, to my creativity, but also to my personal life. And finally, this is a great book. This is the Jimmy Page, the anthology, and it is a book of the entire career of Jimmy Page. I want to open it up and show you. It's kind of his early reflections on things, and he's got photographs and like the first guitar that he had, bands that he was in as a teenager, his studio musician career in the beginning, and then it goes on to have song sheets from Led Zeppelin tunes and the outfits that he picked out to wear on stage, the guitars that he had, the equipment, all sorts of things like that. And what is striking about this is that there's often, and at least for me, my perception of rock bands was some dudes that are just about the music, man. And it's interesting to see that, that they didn't have necessarily agency in anything other than the creative product that they were making. And he talks about not only how to acquire that agency, or how he acquired that agency and control over the creative process that ultimately formed Led Zeppelin, but it's so detailed. I mean, he's got all these little sheets of, this is the things I have to do today, and I've got this recording session here, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And he talks a lot about how a lot of the choices that he made as a business person, not only a musician, were driven by his experiences as a studio musician and in the Yardbirds to the machine of the music industry, and how he wanted to maintain control and use the creative ideas that he had to guide Led Zeppelin to the success that it ultimately had. And there's a lot of very strategic and smart kind of business principles wrapped up in this book too. And so it's really cool, and it surprised me, and it reveals depth of intelligence that I often don't attribute to rock stars. and plus, it's got all these really cool guitars, and they have pictures of all of them. It's amazing. Obviously, I could pick 20 more nonfiction books easily without even thinking about it, and I initially kind of had to really struggle to narrow this down. I hope that you all have enjoyed this, and maybe you've read these, or maybe you haven't and you want to. Be sure to get out there and pick some of these up. Also, if you've got something that you'd say, hey, this is a book that really, nonfiction book that really impressed me, put it in the comments. And as always, I appreciate y'all taking a few minutes to spend with me, and have a great day.